Hi, I want to give you an explanation to essential question number 3, version 1 in the fall of 2011. So this should be probably the first one that you're trying of these. And what we're looking at are 3 assets. So they're right here, assets A, B, C, and D. And if you're trying to read across, you should read it as asset A costs you $19 in time period 0, and then it gets you $39 in time period 4. The trick is it's horizontal layout rather than the vertical one you may be used to. Present worth is already calculated for you, and all the internal rate of returns are calculated except for the first one right there, A. So let's get to the first question here is, what is the internal rate of return of asset A? Well, this one, what you're doing is you're taking the data that you have here for asset A, which is a cost of $19 in period 0 and a benefit of $39 in time period 4. So let's go ahead and give us a little bit of space. If you want to have this one work out right for you, what you should be doing is saying, well, look, the internal rate of return is supposed to be that benefit that's there, so it's the 39. That takes place out in time period 4. It costs you $19. So what you're going to do is just go ahead and take the nth root of that, so 1 on 4, and you subtract 1, and that should give you the internal rate of return for that. I'll show you what the actual number ends up being over on the next slide, but that's a basic calculation for those simple ones where you have a cost in time period 0 and a benefit sometime out in the future. The second question that you should be ready for is that at a minimum acceptable rate of return of 10%, you provide 12 years of service. Which asset would you choose? So whenever you see something that says asset, that means that you're dealing with exclusive choice. If you see assets, you know that you're dealing with unconstrained choice. And this one, the key phrase right here is you must provide 12 years of service. This means that if you glance up at these assets that you have right here, asset A only lasts 4 years, so you got to find a way of producing more than one of those. So you buy an asset A, let it burn out, buy another one, let it burn out, buy another one, let it burn out, and that gets you 12 years of service. And you do the similar things with some of the other ones. That looks like a little error right there, and so that actually should be a 2, because it's pretty clear that this thing didn't last 3 years, it actually lasted 2 years, so we'll have to adjust a little bit of math later on. Well, what you need to do in this situation is actually just kind of spread out the present worth, which is already calculated right here for you, over the life of the asset. So let's take, for example, asset A, which is something that lasts 4 years. Present worth is calculated. It's 7.64. And so what you need to do is to find the annual worth, you just go ahead and take that 7.64 and you multiply it by looking for A, given you know P, so the present worth's what you know, what you're looking for is the A. Keep the interest rates you had before, which is 10% if I'm not mistaken, and spread it out over the life of the asset. This one lasts 4 years, so we'll pop a 4 in there, and that should give you the annual worth of that asset. You do that every single one of those, and again, I'll show you what those actual numbers are in the next slides. And that should be the basic calculation for question 2. So let's go ahead and look now for, let's undo that little piece, question number 3, which is at a minimum acceptable rate of return of 10 and no service requirement, which would you choose? This is just your basic present worth criteria. All you have to do for this one is go on up to your table of assets and look for the asset that has the highest present worth. It should be asset B, sitting around right there at 9.68, and that's all you have to do. You need to essentially explain, well, look, it's B, and it's B because. So you just demonstrate that you actually know what the criteria is. That was interesting. Now I know how to flip things around. Now the last one, again, has the minimum acceptable rate of return is 20%. That means all those present worth calculations are dead. Which asset would you choose? And you have to explain why. Well, what you're doing here is you're forced to use the internal rate of return criteria for exclusive choice. And that one's a nasty little procedure that you should go ahead and check out a video on. But the way it works is that you first order the assets from highest internal rate of return, lowest initial cost to highest initial cost. So basically what you're looking at is that asset A is fairly expensive, so B should go first, Then you should go ahead and see if you should upgrade from B to C. Then you should upgrade, see if you can upgrade from C to A. Then you should see if you should upgrade from A to D. So you order them in that way. You don't order them by internal rate of return. It's just this simple upgrade system. The other thing to worry about is you need to eliminate all the assets that have internal rates of return that are less than the minimum acceptable. In that case, it's 20. And if I'm not mistaken, so let's go ahead and move forward real fast here. If I'm not mistaken, the internal rate of return on this one is just a tinge under 20. So what goes on is that because asset A and asset D have internal rates of return that are less than 20, they're immediately eliminated from it. So your only two choices are going to be B and C. So you start with asset B right here, and you go, okay, asset B, should I upgrade from B to C? So you get to see if this is an option. And what you do is you check that B to C increment. And so if you zoom this down a little bit, if you're going to go from B to C, you should be looking at this particular incremental internal rate of return here. As long as that right there is less than 20%, you know that you're not supposed to upgrade. So upgrading from B to C is a bad idea, so that you find that actually B is your best choice when the internal minimum acceptable rate of return is 20%. So there you go. There is part of your explanation. Now let's go ahead and check the numbers real fast. So here's the result of some of the calculations. Please note that we were calculating in question number 1, this was the internal rate of return. We ended up with a number of 19.7%. This was critical for, question 1 because that's what we're looking for, but also for question 4, we had to check that before we went to see if this was an acceptable asset for us to even consider being the best one. It's less than 20. 20 was the minimum acceptable rate of return, so we know that it wasn't. In question 2, we had to calculate a whole bunch of annual worths, and I showed you how to do that in a single case. That's the general equation right there. So what you're doing is seeing what the benefits are for each period that exists for all 12 of those periods. And what you're doing is saying that for asset A, if you do that repeated purchase trick, you end up with a benefit of $2.41 per period. So what you're doing is trying to pick the asset which provides you with the maximum benefits per period. It looks like that turns out to be asset B in these kind of calculations. The remaining questions, which is just pick the big one and follow this procedure, should be clear after what we just explained. Anyway, so this right here is the answer to essential question 3, version 1 in the fall of 2011.